Mark Dawson never imagined that the life he had built so carefully would fall apart in a single evening. Yet that is exactly what happened on a quiet Wednesday in Seattle. A day that began normally but ended with him walking away from the woman he once believed would stand beside him forever. He had always trusted Emily with an open-hearted certainty that came naturally to him because he grew up believing marriage was a place where two people leaned on each other no matter what. But trust, once shaken, does not break slowly. It falls all at once like a window shattering in the wind, and that night Mark felt the pieces hit him all at once. The moment he discovered the truth, he didn't yell, he didn't break anything, he just felt a deep, cold quiet settle into his chest while he stood in the living room with the soft lamp beside him glowing gently. The same lamp Emily had insisted they buy because it made the house feel warm. Yet that night the light felt harsh, almost painful. His hands shook slightly, not from anger but because the ground beneath him had shifted, as if nothing he knew could be trusted anymore. When he heard Emily calling his name from down the hallway, her voice trembling a little, he didn't answer. He needed time to breathe, but each second felt heavier than the last. Emily stepped into the room slowly, unsure if she should speak, her eyes softer and sadder than usual, filled with a fear Mark had never seen in her before. He could see she wanted to reach for him to explain, but he knew explanations wouldn't change what had happened. He had always believed loyalty held a marriage together. Not gifts, not romantic gestures, not the photographs on their refrigerator, but loyalty, and now that thread had been cut, leaving everything hanging loose. When Mark finally picked up his jacket from the back of the couch, the knots in his stomach tightened. The house suddenly felt unfamiliar even though every corner carried their life. The dining table where they had talked about dreams, the couch where they watched movies on lazy Sundays, the window where they stood together during winter rainstorms, and it all felt distant, as if the memories no longer belonged to him. He placed his hand on the doorknob and realized how strange it was to leave your own home because the heart inside it no longer felt safe. Emily stepped closer, her voice breaking as she said his name again, and this time he heard the desperation, but it didn't pull him back. Instead it reminded him how much he had invested, how many times he had chosen kindness and patience, and how deeply it hurt to feel none of it mattered. When he opened the door, a cold wave of night air rushed in, brushing his face, making him shiver. Yet he welcomed the feeling because the cold was clear. Something he could hold on to that wasn't confusion or heartbreak. He took one step outside, then another, each heavier than the last. His car was only a few feet away, but reaching it felt like crossing a bridge he could never return over. Emily stood in the doorway but didn't chase him. Perhaps because she understood that sometimes silence is all that remains when trust breaks. Mark didn't look back, knowing that if he saw her face he might hesitate, and hesitation was the one thing he couldn't afford. Once inside the car, he rested his forehead against the steering wheel, closing his eyes as exhaustion washed over him. He had thought heartbreak would be loud and chaotic, but it was quiet, too quiet, like the world had dimmed. He started the engine with slow, shaky hands, not because he feared where he was going but because he feared who he might become if he stayed, then backed out of the driveway while the familiar gravel crunched beneath the wheels, reminding him he was leaving behind not just a house but a life he had worked hard to build. As he drove into the night, the city lights blurred slightly. His eyes weren't full of tears but of a tired sadness that sank deep. He didn't know where he was going, only that he needed distance. The radio stayed off, the only sounds the hum of the engine and distant traffic. Eventually he pulled into a quiet parking lot overlooking the water, a place he had once come during an early fight, but this time the hurt felt deeper, not because of what she had done but because of how completely he had trusted her. The moonlight reflected on the water, calm and glowing in sharp contrast to the pain inside him. He sat there for a long time, simply letting the night settle around him, trying to understand how one moment could change everything, yet every thought led back to the same painful truth. He thought about how they met in college, the easy laughter, the promises made on a rooftop under the stars, how she held his hand during hard times and encouraged his dreams, but tonight those memories felt like another life that had slipped away without warning. He wished he could erase the hurt and return to the version of them that felt whole, but some things, once broken, could not be repaired right away. Leaning back, he looked at the sky as clouds drifted slowly across it and wondered what Emily was doing, whether she was crying in the silent house, whether she felt the same cold emptiness, but thinking of her only tightened his chest again, so he closed his eyes and let the darkness calm him even for a moment. He stayed until the night softened into early morning, the city still asleep and the air crisp, then drove to a small motel on the outskirts of Seattle, paid for a room with a tired nod, walked inside, and sat on the edge of the bed without removing his jacket while the faint smell of old carpet barely registered because his mind kept replaying everything like a movie he couldn't turn off. He didn't cry, the shock hadn't worn off yet, and instead he felt a strange calm, the kind the heart creates to protect itself. He told himself he would start fresh and not let this moment define him, yet beneath those words was an ache shaped like everything he had hoped and believed would last. Now all of it felt uncertain, and uncertainty was a stranger he had never learned to live with. But even in the middle of heartbreak, a small truth settled inside him, bringing the tiniest measure of strength. Leaving had been the right decision, maybe the hardest he had ever made, because sometimes love isn't about staying. Sometimes love is about stepping away when trust is broken, giving your heart space to heal and yourself a chance to breathe again, even if each breath hurts. As dawn painted soft colors across the sky outside his motel window, Mark closed his eyes, not to escape the pain but to gather the strength he would need for the days ahead. He didn't know what the future held or whether Emily would ever be part of his story again. Only that his life had changed and now he had to learn to move forward with a heart still aching in the quiet morning light. Winter arrived in Seattle with a sharp chill that seemed to match the cold silence inside Mark Dawson's life. Months had passed since he walked out, and every day since felt like learning to breathe in a different world. He rented a small apartment near Capitol Hill, chosen because nothing in it reminded him of before. The walls plain, the furniture simple, the nights quiet. Not a home yet, but a place to rebuild piece by piece. He kept busy with work, taking extra hours and new projects to avoid the moments when the mind drifts to old memories. His coworkers noticed his focus but never asked why, sensing the pain and offering kindness through silence, which Mark appreciated because he wasn't ready to talk. Sometimes even thinking was too heavy. He started jogging in the mornings, at first simply to stay in motion so the past couldn't catch him, breath turning white in the cold, shoes hitting the sidewalk in steady rhythm, and over time the runs became a calming routine that kept him centered when nights still carried echoes of what he lost. His favorite stop became a small cafe called Harbor Grounds, owned by a warm-hearted older woman named Denise who greeted everyone like her own kids and never asked too many questions. She had the kind of smile that felt like a gentle blanket on a cold day, and Mark would come in after his run, order black coffee, sit by the window and watch early sunlight stretch across the street. Those moments felt peaceful, almost like recovery. Yet healing is not a straight path. Some mornings the quiet sunlight brought back memories he didn't want. Emily laughing while making pancakes, humming while watering plants, reaching for his hand when they crossed the street. Because memories don't fade just because they hurt. They fade slowly, stubbornly, wanting to remind you of what you once believed was forever. Even though he had left for good reasons, there were nights he questioned whether he walked away too fast, whether he could have tried harder, whether forgiveness was possible. But those thoughts were always chased away by the sharp reminder of betrayal. Trust had not been a small rope in their marriage. It was the foundation, and once the foundation cracked, the house did too. Still, Emily lived in a corner of his heart that refused to disappear. He didn't speak her name, didn't check her social media, didn't ask mutual friends, but the absence of her voice created a quiet space nothing else could fill. One snowy morning after a long run, Mark stepped into the cafe and felt his phone buzz. He didn't think much of it until he saw the name, Emily, and just seeing it twisted something inside him, part pain, part longing, part something he didn't want to name. Her message was short. "I need to see you. Please." He stared at the screen while his coffee sat untouched and his breath felt heavy. He didn't know what he was supposed to feel: shock, anger, hope, and the worst part was that his heart reacted before his mind did, bringing back the familiar ache of late nights when he used to hold her close believing nothing could break them. He put the phone face down and forced himself to breathe. He had been building a new life, slow and fragile, and her message felt like a hand reaching into everything he had tried to repair. He didn't reply that day or the next, telling himself he owed her nothing. She had made her choices, she had caused the pain he was climbing out of, but every night her message replayed. "I need to see you. Please." And the word please carried a weight he couldn't ignore. Finally, on a night when he felt more exhausted than usual, he opened the message again and typed without overthinking, "You can talk," once, and sent it before he could change his mind. His stomach tightened immediately and he stared at the ceiling, knowing allowing her even the smallest part of his life felt dangerous, yet also knowing sometimes closure is a door that only opens when both people stand in front of it. Emily responded almost instantly, "Thank you." Two simple words heavy with emotion, and Mark sighed deeply, already unsure whether he had made the right choice. They agreed to meet at a lakeside park they used to visit when life was sweet and uncomplicated. The moment he read the location, his chest tightened again because he remembered her sitting on the wooden bench watching ducks while leaning against his shoulder. Memories always returned when you least wanted them. The day came faster than expected. The sky pale, the wind cold enough to sting his cheeks, every sound sharper in the quiet. As he drove, he kept his focus on the road, trying not to think about the woman he had once promised forever, but his heart pulled up images he had tried to bury. When he arrived, he saw Emily standing near the lake wrapped in a long gray coat, hands hidden in pockets, hair moving gently with the wind. She looked smaller, almost fragile, as if the months had carved their own story into her. She turned when she heard his footsteps, and when their eyes met, something inside Mark shifted. Not forgiveness, not anger, just a deep awareness that she had once meant everything to him. Emily didn't move closer at first,